Hi everyone, Heather here with Astrology with Heather.com, and I'm back with another very special video. And this video is going to be part forecast, part tutorial, where we're going to be discussing the energy of transiting Jupiter in conjunction or, in aspect in general with all of your natal planets, all 10 astrological planets. And so most of you are probably at least somewhat aware of the fact that Jupiter is a benefic energy. It's one of the two benefic planets. Jupiter and Venus are both considered to be benefics in traditional astrology. And Jupiter in particular is known as the great benefic, and for good reason. Jupiter brings abundance, opportunity, wealth, expansion, luck, good fortune, blessings. And it also brings wisdom and knowledge and elevated experiences, elevated states of consciousness and awareness. It's the energy of the teacher that teaches you through the events that unfold throughout your lifetime. It's also an energy that can bring indulgence or overindulgence, or simply bring excess, depending on where it's falling in your chart and how it's aspecting your planets and which planets it's actually aspecting. And so before we get into all of that, for those of you who are new to my channel, welcome. I'm Heather Eland. I'm a professional astrologer and astrology teacher. I specialize in helping students who are struggling to put all of the pieces together, learn to give meaningful, accurate astrology readings with confidence, and make sure you subscribe to my channel because I do a new forecast or tutorial every single Saturday at 9 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. And so you don't want to miss that. And the way that we're going to actually structure this particular video is I'm going to start with about 10 to 15 minutes of an overview of the energy of Jupiter and kind of the ins and outs of Jupiter in different signs and in different placements to give additional nuance and layers to the interpretations I'm going to be giving for Jupiter conjunct the 10 planets. And so make sure that you listen to this all the way through, because it's going to provide an important context that you're going to need to really use this information in the best possible way. And so kind of getting back into the energy of Jupiter. So as I mentioned before, Jupiter is a beneficial energy. It brings luck and good fortune and expansion and wisdom. And it can also bring indulgence and excess in certain circumstances. And so how do we determine whether Jupiter is going to bring something really positive or maybe something that isn't quite as positive? And kind of what is the spectrum of the experience that you can anticipate when Jupiter hits one of your natal planets? And so there's a couple of different things that you have to kind of consider here with Jupiter. So the first thing is that Jupiter is not always going to bring a giant windfall. And usually these Jupiter energies, especially with the conjunction, they don't do that. They don't happen all at once. It brings an opportunity to initiate or start something or seed something that will continue to grow and expand in a very positive way over the next 12-year cycle of Jupiter. And in this video, we're going to be focusing primarily on that conjunction energy. However, you will notice that these configurations, that these energies will apply with Jupiter in sextile, square, trine, opposition to these planets that we're going to be discussing here in this video, but it's going to come about in a little bit of a different way. And so the conjunction usually starts something. It's a new opportunity that arises that continues to grow and expand for the next 12 years, which is an entire Jupiter transit through the zodiac. When it's a sextile, it's something that has already begun, that you're starting to see some of the benefits from. The square can bring a lot of excess to something that was already seated, where it can be overwhelming to you in a lot of ways. The trine is where things grow and expand in a very positive way with ease. And the opposition is usually when you will see a lot of growth and expansion and maybe even some sort of windfall that occurs at the culmination of something very positive that's been growing and that you've been working on and that's been expanding for quite some time, usually over the course of roughly 6 years. And so All of these energies are going to be a little bit different. But I will say that when people see a really nice Jupiter transit in their chart, especially when they're new to astrology, they tend to have very elevated expectations for what's going to occur in physical reality. And oftentimes the reality of the situation doesn't meet those expectations. Sometimes Jupiter will bring something really crazy, like wild financial abundance, if you have that potential in your chart, and if the circumstances, with all of the activations in your chart are supporting that. However, Jupiter is subject to the rulership of the domain where it's actually transiting. So the sign that it's transiting through can indicate whether Jupiter can show up to its fullest potential and provide all of that luck, good fortune, opportunity, abundance that it has as its innate capabilities, versus if it's going to be hindered, or it might not even be able to provide very much at all, just maybe a little bit of ease, or a little bit of wiggle room in an area that's normally constricted or tight for you for a variety of reasons. And so we're going to kind of get into some of those nuances there. But yeah, typically with Jupiter transits, and just in general with transits, Jupiter can only activate what's present in your chart as a natal potential already. If you don't have the natal potential for being a billionaire, then Jupiter is not going to bring you $1 billion, right? If you don't have the natal potential for having a really successful business, Jupiter's not going to bring that to you necessarily. It can bring you career advancement and opportunities in a different way, but it's not going to always bring you the wildest scenario that you could dream up. It can only, again, all transits can only activate what's present in your natal chart. And so that's why it's very important to understand your natal placements of your planets before you get into understanding the transits. The other thing that you really need to kind of make note of when you're looking at Jupiter is that Jupiter is more beneficial for people who were born during the day. And so Jupiter is considered a diurnal planet. It's a day chart planet. It's of the sect of the day. And so the diurnal planets are Jupiter, Saturn, and the Sun. And so these three planets work well together. They're friends. But Jupiter in general tends to operate to its fullest potential more effectively in a chart of somebody who's born during the day. And so if you were born with the sun above the horizon, Jupiter will be extra special and extra potent for you versus somebody who's born at night with the sun below the horizon. If you want to learn more about this topic of sect, I did a full video on this with Yelena Crawford, who is a really brilliant astrologer. She's one of my teaching assistants in the Cosmic Academy of Astrology. And so you can find that video floating around up here somewhere, so you can learn more about that. So the second consideration for just evaluating Jupiter and its effectiveness in bringing blessings, good fortune, abundance, and expansion in your life in a positive way is to look at the sign that Jupiter is transiting, because Jupiter is more effective in some signs than in others. So just like with every other planet, Jupiter has a sign where it's exalted, where it's at home, where it's at detriment, where it's at its fall. It has signs where it does better, and it has signs where it is inhibited in a lot of different ways. And so, for example, Jupiter is exalted in the sign of Cancer. Exaltation is the highest, most elevated energy of a planetary placement. And so when you have Jupiter in the sign of Cancer, it's not just supported with all the right tools to give you what you need in order to succeed, in order to grow, in order to expand. It is elevated. It is enhanced. It has its fullest, it just has its fullest potential available to it. It's not just like it's supported, it's like it has all the help it could possibly need to give you what you desire, to give you that abundance, to give you that fulfillment, to grow and expand things for you. So if you have a planet that we're going to be describing that's situated in the sign of Cancer, when Jupiter comes through and conjuncts that planet, it's going to have a much greater opportunity to provide really incredible good luck and good fortune for you in that area associated with the significations we'll discuss. Jupiter is also really nice in the signs of Sagittarius and in Pisces, because in Sagittarius and in Pisces, Jupiter in traditional astrology is at home. As I'm recording this video, Jupiter is transiting through the sign of Pisces right now and hitting all of your Pisces planets if you have any, and it's not inhibited. It has this ability to successfully grow and expand and give you good things, hope and opportunity and good fortune in that area of your life where that planet is situated in the sign of Pisces. The same thing goes for Sagittarius, because Jupiter is at home in Sagittarius. It has all of the right tools to give you, especially in the sign of Sagittarius, really incredible experiences, really insightful perspectives on life that enhance your wisdom, that enhance your ability to understand reality fully and completely. It enhances your optimism, and it enhances your effectiveness in growing and expanding and taking advantage of opportunities. Because one of the things with Jupiter is that if it's in a sign where it's not doing well, it can bring you opportunities, but you might not have the ability to take advantage of those opportunities due to either internal or external circumstances. And so in the signs of Sagittarius and Pisces, typically, again, you have to look at the whole chart and the natal potential. And, if there's other aspects involved in the birth chart, this might change it. But typically, it's able to provide you with something really good, something really powerful, something really positive. Jupiter also does best in the masculine signs. And so all of the diurnal planets, if you remember back to a couple minutes ago, the diurnal planets are Jupiter, Saturn, and the Sun. The diurnal planets do best in the masculine signs. And so the masculine signs are the air signs, so Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, as well as the fire signs, so Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. And so think about the energy of Jupiter being in Sagittarius in its home sign. Not only is that its home sign, but it's a masculine fire sign. So that's actually going to be a little bit more elevated than Jupiter in Pisces, even though they're both at home. All things to consider. And so kind of going on the inhibitory factors, when Jupiter is in its fall, so the sign of its fall is always going to be the opposite of the sign of its exaltation. So when Jupiter is in the sign of Capricorn, it's going to be very, very limited. Not only is it unsupported, not only does it not have the tools it needs to accomplish what it wants to accomplish, but it's like it has no tools. And it could even be like restricted in some way. I've heard the fall placement being described as if a planet is like in jail or in a cage or something like that, where it's not able to move around, it's not able to really do much of anything. Although I would say that it can still do something and it can still bring opportunities. But with the Capricorn placement, I noticed that people's expectations are usually really elevated in the reality of what it can bring, because it's a benefic. It can still bring positivity, it'll bring ease, or it'll bring something that can be utilized in a positive way objectively, but your expectations of what it'll do might not meet reality, or you might not be able to actually take advantage of those opportunities. Kind of like Jupiter in a cage, like you have something really beautiful in front of you, but you can't actually go out and get it because you're stuck in this position. Another way to kind of look at this is like, I put in my notes kind of the example of chopping down a tree. So think about, Jupiter exalted in Cancer. It has the best tools, all the tools it needs, and then some. So it doesn't just have like a really sharp, really good axe. It has like this crazy chainsaw, and it's just like, zoop, and it cuts through the tree like butter. And it's able to accomplish what it needs to accomplish. When it's in its fall in Capricorn, it's very limited. It's almost as if it has no axe, it has no chainsaw, it has nothing. And it's just, you're trying to push down a tree with your own strength. Like you're just pushing the tree trunk. And like, yeah, you can wiggle maybe the tree a little bit if it's a smaller tree, but you're probably not going to knock it down that way. So when Jupiter is in its detriment in the sign of Gemini and Virgo, it's unsupported and it has the wrong tools. And so that means that it still will bring benefits, but it's not going to be able to bring you everything that it could have in a different sign. It's not going to be able to elevate that full potential for you. And so in Gemini, it's a little bit better than Virgo, because remember, Gemini is a masculine sign. It's an air sign. And so it's not as difficult in detriment in Gemini as it is in Virgo, but it's unsupported. It has the wrong tools. And so it's kind of like chopping down a tree with a really small axe that hasn't been sharpened in like 10 years. It's going to be very hard. It's going to take a lot of effort, and it's going to take a lot longer than it normally would, but eventually you can probably chop down that tree. That's the energy of Jupiter at its detriment. And then finally, just as Jupiter does better in the masculine signs, it's not as effective in the feminine signs. And so the feminine signs are the earth and the water signs. So the earth signs are Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. And the water signs are Cancer, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. And so with all of that considered, let's get into the energy of Jupiter in conjunction or an aspect in general with all of the 10 astrological planets. I'm going to be going through both the modern planets, so the external, like outer planets, and the traditional planets. I'm going to go through the entire solar system here, including the sun and moon. Okay, and so Jupiter conjunct the sun. So when Jupiter in transit comes into a conjunction with your natal sun, this is one of the most lucky, this is one of the luckiest energies that you can have. Your entire being will be enhanced. Your entire energy will be elevated. You're going to be much more conscious and aware of opportunities that come to you, so you can take hold of them and so you can take advantage of them. This is also going to be true for the house that's occupied by Leo in your chart, because that house is ruled by the sun. And so you can see a lot of abundance in the area of that house. And also when it comes to leadership potential, success, right? You can be center stage. You can be recognized for something that you've accomplished or that you've done. Or you can have a new opportunity to accomplish something new that will grow and expand in a very positive way for the next 12-year cycle of Jupiter. And an example of this that I can give you from my own life is when Jupiter was in a conjunction with my sun, and its detriment even in the sign of Virgo. It's unsupported, it has the wrong tools, so it's going to take a little longer, but it still has brought a lot of really great opportunity for me. And that was the time when I officially started my business as an astrologer. And so that has very clearly grown and expanded and turned into something really crazy. It wasn't that I had a windfall all at once. I started with just a Facebook page and word of mouth from, the free and donation-based readings I've been doing for practice for the few months prior to that time. And very slowly, with a lot of effort and a lot of hard work, because again, Jupiter in its detriment, you have to work a little bit more for it. I was able to grow and expand, and now I'm here in front of tens of thousands of people teaching you about Jupiter. About 6.5 years in now, so I'm at my Jupiter opposition from that time period. And so, so that's kind of the Jupiter conjunction to the sun. It can increase your energy, your health, your vitality. It increases your ability to be seen as a leader or to enhance your leadership potential. And it enhances your success in basically anything that you want to accomplish. It doesn't have to be business or work related, although the sun can bring that more so than some other planets. It also can enhance or elevate or grow your relationship with authority figures in your life, or your father or father-like figures in your immediate situation, in your family, in your environment. And so that's another thing that can come up with around that time period of Jupiter conjunct your natal sun. And again, this is something that will grow and expand for the next 12-year cycle of Jupiter. It's not a one-time situation. So moving on from there, Jupiter conjunct the moon. This is also applicable not just for the moon itself, but for the significations or the topics and themes that are associated with the house that's occupied by the sign of Cancer. And so for those who are a little bit more well-versed in astrology, just think about the house that's occupied by Cancer and how Jupiter could bring abundance and good fortune and blessings and opportunities to that area of your chart. But with Jupiter conjunct the moon, even though the moon is the ruler of Cancer, so it's kind of like its exaltation lord, Jupiter conjunct the moon can be kind of positive and negative. It does tend to make people overly emotional, especially when the moon is in certain signs, like when it's in Aries or, any of the fire signs, really. I tend to notice that it does that. It makes people a little bit more emotionally overdramatic during that transit. However, it also makes people emotionally much more optimistic. You just feel better. You feel safer. You feel more secure, and internally you feel more grateful, more gracious, more abundant, regardless of your external circumstances. This is also a time that Jupiter can expand on your home, your family, your fertility. And so if that's not something that you're aiming for, just be extra careful during that time. It also expands on all positive emotion. And so if you're somebody who tends to, maybe you have the moon in the sign of Capricorn and you tend to kind of hide your emotions, or your emotions are a little bit more melancholy, maybe you have a different Saturn influence going on there, kind of at baseline, this will enhance your emotions and you'll feel much more positive. Your mood will change for the better. And that changes everything about your perspective on reality. It also enhances your intuition. Your intuition is going to be heightened and expanded on like tenfold, but in a very positive way, not in a way that's like unruly that you can't deal with because it's overwhelming. In most circumstances, again, with Jupiter in certain placements, it could make it overwhelming. But for the most part, this is a positive thing. This is also going to enhance your creativity and your creative potential. And this can be really good for your mother and for her health and well-being, or for your relationship with your mother or maternal figures in your life. This is also really great for your body in general. The moon is the general significator of the body in astrology. And so looking at this in terms of medical astrology, this can bring good health. It can enhance your health in a lot of ways. It can enhance your body, so that way you have a little bit more luck and a little bit more opportunity when it comes to the way your physical body operates. On the flip side of that, I've noticed that because the moon is the water in your body, it can cause water retention, especially for women, because the moon is the ovarian hormones. And so you might find that you're having issues with your cycle, or that you're holding water or retaining water a lot more than you normally would. So sometimes with Jupiter transiting the moon, again, especially for women, you'll gain a few pounds, but it's usually water weight or hormonal, and it'll go away after Jupiter finishes that transit in most cases. And so those are things that I've noticed with Jupiter conjunct the moon, or just aspecting the moon in general. The water retention is worse with the square to the moon versus the conjunction, but it can happen regardless. And then Jupiter conjunct Mercury. So Jupiter conjunct Mercury, this also applies for the significations, the topics, the themes that are associated with the houses in your birth chart that are occupied by the signs of Gemini and Virgo. Those are both of the Mercury ruled signs. And so just take that into account and think about and reflect on how Jupiter could bring opportunity for wealth and for abundance in those areas of your life as well. But Jupiter conjunct Mercury can bring a genius energy. This is one of my favorite energies for learning a new skill, or jumping into public speaking or teaching something new, because this really enhances not just your mind, but your confidence with your ideas, with your thoughts, with your knowledge. So you can really explain yourself in a way that is not just confident, but is really wise and really easy for people to understand. This is a good time to impart wisdom in one way or another. It's great for writing, it's great for publishing, it's great for, again, teaching, speaking, or learning something new, or connecting with a new teacher. This is also a really great time in general for just expanding the mind. You're going to have a lot of really incredible, really powerful new ideas. This is enhancing that in a variety of ways. This is also making it so you can have luck and good fortune and opportunities that come to you by way of messages and communications from the outside, so through other people. So you might get like an email or a phone call or a letter in the actual mail that is providing you with some sort of opportunity that you can take hold of, that can create abundance in your life, especially abundance when it comes to your mind and to your knowledge base, or to your ability to share your own wisdom, your own truth, your own experiences with the world in a very positive way. And so that's part of what goes on with the Jupiter conjunction to Mercury. This is also a really great time for purchasing a vehicle or for travel on the ground, like by train or by car or by bus. Those types of things can be enhanced, and you can have really great opportunities that come to you through short trips and day trips and things like that you might not otherwise have available to you. And so that's another consideration for Jupiter conjunct Mercury. Jupiter conjunct Venus. Jupiter conjunct Venus is one of the luckiest transits in addition to Jupiter conjunct the Sun, because these are the two benefic energies, like the two benefic planets. They are the planets that have the ability to say yes to things, to bring opportunities, to give you the green light to move forward with something. And so anything and everything that you want to jump in on and take advantage of or indulge in can be enhanced during this time. Also make note of the houses that are occupied by Taurus and by Libra, because those are going to be the Venus ruled signs. And so the significations, the topics, the themes that are associated with those houses will also be elevated and enhanced in a very positive fashion while Jupiter is making that conjunction to Venus in your birth chart. But Jupiter conjunct Venus, it brings pleasure and joy. That is one of the biggest things that it brings, an abundance and an enhancement of joy and your ability to experience joy, your ability to experience desire. This can be one that can be, increasing your not just like your, I don't want to say like your libido, that's more like Mars, which we'll get into, but it increases your sensuality and your connection to other people in relationship on a romantic level. It also enhances your relationships in general, because Venus is the planet that rules our love language. It's the way that we interrelate with other people. It's the way that we show our love and appreciation to others, and it's the way that we want love and appreciation shown to us in return. I have a whole video on that topic up here that you can watch after this if you're interested in learning more. But because it's so tied into the way that we interact and interrelate, show our love, receive love, or want to receive love, our ability to do that is enhanced. Our ability to form really positive, really beautiful, really mutually beneficial connections with other people is greatly enhanced when Jupiter is transiting your natal Venus, especially by conjunction, but really by any configuration, by any planetary aspect. And so that's really important. Kind of on the flip side, Jupiter with Venus can bring overindulgence. Venus has to do with sweets, and Jupiter as well has to do with like kind of overindulgence and things like that. So like sugars and things like that. So you can develop a sweet tooth. You can overindulge in food and sensory pleasures in general. And so that's something, again, to make note of when Jupiter is in a conjunction with Venus. The other thing is that it can create like overindulgence in general, where you just become lazy and you become just overly captivated by the pursuit of sensory pleasures on all levels. And so this could be a time where opportunities can be coming up for you, but you could just feel like really lazy and really indulgent and like you want to just kick back and enjoy things, as opposed to actually taking advantage of opportunities that are going to require some work or some effort for you. So especially if you have this Jupiter-Venus conjunction, let's say in its detriment in Virgo, with Jupiter and Virgo and Venus at its fall. That would be a time where maybe you just want to kick back and relax and overindulge, and you might not take advantage of the opportunities because you can see how much work they will require from you. So that's just, again, something to make note of. So Jupiter conjunct Mars. So when Jupiter conjuncts Mars, Mars is a malefic energy, and it's of a different sect than Jupiter. And so when they combine forces like that, it's not going to be, it's still going to bring good things. It's going to help you to become much more motivated, much more ambitious, much more driven to accomplish whatever it is that you desire to accomplish. And so enhancing your energy in that way is one of the best things Jupiter can do in a conjunction with Mars. So it supercharges your ambition and your energy. It also, though, can bring overreactions. And this is by and large the biggest energy that I tend to see with people who have Jupiter transiting their natal Mars. Like, yes, opportunities, yes, energy, but it's kind of like you're overreacting to everything that's going on, every stimulus, everything that you're become more combative, which is an energy of Mars, right? It's the energy of battle. It's the energy of separation. It's the energy of exercising your will, as opposed to taking into consideration the needs, wants, desires, the will of other people. So it's almost like with Jupiter conjunct Mars, in certain circumstances, you can overexert your will, become overly ambitious, and bulldoze way over people. And I see that happen quite a lot as well. And so yes, on an objective level, you'll get a lot done, you'll accomplish a lot, you'll be very motivated. A lot of your goals and ambitions will be initiated or achieved during this time, but at what cost, right? You have to make sure that you're not pushing everybody out of the way in order to make that happen, because the fallout from that is usually very martial, like battles, arguments, disputes, separations, those types of things. And so that's just something to take into account and to take into mind, especially when Jupiter's in one of those signs, like in its detriment or something like that, or if it's being aspected negatively by other planets. Also, you need to take into consideration the houses occupied by both Aries and Scorpio and the significations, topics, and themes associated with those two houses, because those will also be areas of growth and abundance and opportunity and potentially overdoing things, although not to the same extent as that Mars conjunction, but it can be an energy, especially with that Jupiter and Mars. That's where I see people overdoing it, by and large, like the most. And this is also an energy, by the way, that can lead to burnout. It could just be that you are going, you're busy, you're so driven, you're so focused on your goals that you burn yourself out and you make yourself sick, or you fizzle out before you really get there. So that's something also to take into consideration when Jupiter conjuncts your Mars. And whatever it is that you initiate during that time that you're driven for, you're going to be carrying it out and growing it and developing it over the next 12-year cycle of Jupiter. Okay, Jupiter conjunct Jupiter. So when Jupiter conjuncts your natal Jupiter, this is also known as the Jupiter return. It happens once every 12 years, and it marks the beginning of a new cycle where new opportunities will be enhanced, will be seeded, will grow over the next 12-year cycle of Jupiter in relationship to Jupiter's placement and significations in your personal chart. And so what I mean by that is, as I mentioned before, nothing can be activated by transit that's not already present as a potential in your natal chart. And so you have to look at the natal story, the natal potential that's being described by Jupiter's placement in your chart. You'll have a new opportunity that will come around and that will grow and expand and be enhanced each time Jupiter comes into a conjunction with your natal Jupiter. You'll look at the house placement of Jupiter, but also the houses that are occupied by both Sagittarius and Pisces. The themes, the topics that are associated with those houses will also be subject to new beginnings, because this is the beginning and the ending of a cycle. But also new opportunities will be seeded that will expand over time in those houses, in those areas of your chart. So this is really about enhancing opportunity. It's where you're already lucky due to Jupiter's energy. It's what you already are given as a blessing in your innate makeup, right? It's like your innate talents, your innate gifts, your innate areas of ease, based on not just who you are, but your circumstances that you were born into. This is where it's going to come back around and enhance that and bring a new cycle of opportunity over and over and over again every 12 years of your life. Jupiter conjunct Saturn. So the Jupiter conjunct Saturn, this is the ruler of its detriment placement in the sign of Capricorn. However, Jupiter conjunct Saturn is not the worst thing. In the sky, in mundane transits, when you have Jupiter conjunct Saturn, it's known as the Great Conjunction, and it brings in a brand new cycle. It's associated with the rise and fall of rulers and rulerships and empires, but especially phases in the collective society as a whole, right? I have a whole video about the Great Conjunction that just happened in Aquarius that is still in effect right now up here, so you can watch that a little bit later if you're interested in that. But it brings a few different things here. So when Jupiter conjuncts your natal Saturn, it brings an expansion of boundaries. Saturn is your boundaries. It's the structures in your life. It's an area where you have to work a little bit harder on something. And so it expands on your boundaries and loosens them up a little bit, so that way you have a little bit more wiggle room in an area that is otherwise a little bit more restrictive or a little bit more burdensome or hard in your life. So that can be actually quite nice, but you're not going to get a giant windfall because Saturn's involved, right? You're going to have to pace yourself. You're going to have to put in the work. You're going to have to do it the right way. It's going to take time. This is also an energy that's associated not just with slow growth and the expansion of boundaries, but it also has to do with lessons and teaching and wisdom. It's kind of like a time where you can get a perspective on your challenges and your hardships that you've faced throughout your life due to the nature of Saturn. And you can start to look at it as a lesson, or you can start to take away new nuggets of wisdom based on that reflection on that experience, or based on new related experiences that are brought up or expanded on by Jupiter during that time. So it's a time of learning. It's a time of really acquiring a lot of inner growth and new opportunities internally to shift your perspective. It's kind of like a big paradigm shift where you start to view your biggest struggles as your biggest teachers, your biggest opportunities, your biggest lessons. You start to see how those those challenges contribute to your growth. Jupiter conjunct natal Uranus. So Uranus is the planet of shock and awe. It's the planet of revolution, change, freedom, and with the expansive energy of Jupiter, which also has this association with freedom, that's what you're going to be craving. And so this is going to help break you free of any stuck, stagnant, repetitive, dull, monotonous energy. It's going to bring opportunities for you to do new and exciting ways, or new and exciting things in new and exciting ways. You're going to be thinking and acting differently from the way that you've acted before. You're going to be doing things that you never thought you would do. You're going to be challenged in really positive ways that you never thought you'd be challenged. You're going to be connecting with and meeting very unusual, different types of people who you never thought you'd be connecting with. And it's going to be fun. And so Jupiter conjunct Uranus, your natal Uranus, breaks you out of the mundane and brings you into a new and exciting, different version of reality. And it's going to change your perspective on life, again, in a very alternative, very outside of the box fashion that you never would have considered otherwise. Also, you have to consider the house that is occupied by the sign of Aquarius when you're looking at Jupiter conjunct Uranus. And kind of going back to Jupiter conjunct Saturn, something I forgot to mention is that you do have to also consider the houses that are occupied by Capricorn and Aquarius, because traditionally those are the two signs that are ruled by Saturn. And so think about the themes and topics associated with that in terms of Jupiter conjunct Saturn. With Jupiter conjunct Uranus, Aquarius is co-ruled by Uranus. And so in modern astrology, Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. And so you're going to want to consider the topics and themes associated with the house occupied by the sign of Aquarius in whole sign houses in your birth chart. And that is going to be another area subject to opportunities, good fortune, blessings, wisdom, expansion, and change. Jupiter conjunct Neptune. So Jupiter conjunct Neptune is a really positive energy, and that's actually what we're experiencing right now in this moment. as a collective, because in the mundane transits, Jupiter and Neptune are in a conjunction in the skies as I'm recording this video. If you haven't already done so, make sure you watch my forecast on the Jupiter conjunction to Neptune and how that will impact you and your sign. But Jupiter conjunct Neptune in the birth chart is a little bit different because this is going to impact you personally, and Neptune's going to be in a different location. It's going to be making different configurations to your natal planets, and so it's going to be, you know, a little bit of a different situation here. But Jupiter and Neptune tend to go really well together. It expands on your spirituality, your inner wisdom, your creativity. It expands on your intuition. It expands on your spiritual, religious, and philosophical knowledge and your understanding of the interconnectedness between all things. This energy will help you to loosen your boundaries and become much more compassionate toward other people. You're going to feel what other people are feeling. You're going to want to help and be more charitable when it comes to the suffering and the issues that are being encountered by other people in your environment, in your life, in your community, in the world at large. And so this is a really great time to start a charity or to do something more charitable, or to expand on your spiritual practice, to turn inward, to do something to broaden your horizons on that spiritual and philosophical level. And so Jupiter conjunct Neptune will also have an impact on the house that's occupied by Pisces in your birth chart in whole sign houses. Pisces in modern Western astrology is ruled by Neptune, and therefore the house that's occupied by Pisces and the topics pertaining to that house will be subject to expansion, to abundance, to good fortune, to new opportunities that can come up for you, that can grow and expand over the next 12 years. Finally, Jupiter conjunct Pluto. This again will also apply to the house that's occupied by Scorpio in terms of creating new opportunities. But this is a big one. So on a global scale, it's associated with mass redistributions of wealth. The wealthy becoming wealthier, the poor becoming poorer, that divide growing. We've seen that time and time again. We had that during the collapse of the housing bubble, 2008, at the onset of that. We had that at the start of the COVID pandemic. And it's a thing that happens. This is also something that shows up in the charts of the ultra wealthy in usually, you know, in a way that is associated with wealth and abundance in terms of house placement and things like that. Bill Gates, for example, who is the wealthiest man in the world, or was the wealthiest man in the world, who has a lot of power, right? That's Pluto. He, you know, has that conjunction in his second house. And so this is one that can be associated by transits with massive movements of money, massive redistributions of wealth in your own life, especially if it's configured in your second house or your eighth house, or if it's aligned with the planetary rulers of your second and eighth house. So it's associated with wealth transfer. It can actually bring financial windfalls, but it can take things to extremes. And so this is expanding on polarity. This is expanding on opposites. This is expanding on the duality, or the dualistic nature of our reality in a lot of different ways. This is also potentially going to expand on your psychic abilities, and also your psychic drive and your ability to use your psychic energy like a magnet to draw in whatever it is that you want to draw in, and to repel whatever it is that you want to repel. This can create opportunities where it's just very bizarre when this transit happens, because it's like you think of something and you're like, wow, I really want that. And then all of a sudden the, you know, seas part and the stars align, and the right people and the right situations are being drawn to you to create what you want to create. Or you're like, wow, I really don't want to do that thing. And then all of a sudden this obligation you had, it just gets roadblocked and shut down, and then you don't actually have to do it. Like, that's something that commonly happens when you have Jupiter conjunct your natal Pluto. You become more powerful when it comes to your psychic energy and your thoughts and your psychological energy. And so you want to be very careful about how you're using that, of course. But this is a time where you're going to become much more like laser focused on the opportunities that you can see for yourself that you want to create, and that's going to be a part of this too. You know, in terms of the personal implications, this usually creates a massive, very rapid transformation in one form or another, on a personal level, or when it comes to your situation, circumstances, environment, the things that are external to you, depending on where this is falling, what chart or in your chart, like which house and things like that. But it does create, this is the one Jupiter transit that does tend to create like something that happens sort of all at once. It's much more rapid and much more transformative, right? That's that Pluto signification there. And it usually stems from the psychological first. So it stems from within and then it extends to without, if that makes sense. And so that's that Jupiter conjunction to Pluto. This could also be a time where you feel a drive toward self-understanding and self-exploration. So you want to gain inner knowledge and inner wisdom. That's that Jupiter-Pluto energy. You might want to study things like psychology or occult sciences or astrology or things like that, much more so. And it's a time where you feel you can have an increase in power in the area of your chart that this is falling in, or the topics and significations related to that area of the chart. You can become more powerful in that area, or you yourself can move into a position of greater power, and not necessarily authority, but power, where you have the ability to control something. You have much more control over your circumstances during the time that you have Jupiter transiting Pluto, and maybe as a result of the opportunities that come up as Jupiter's transiting Pluto over the next 12 years during that Jupiter cycle. And so that is all of the astrological planets. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this video, make sure you like the video, subscribe to my channel so you never miss an important astrology update, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.